One of the things that I see in fertility care a lot is this complete and utter misalignment of interests. Patient wants one thing, doctor wants one thing, shareholders want one thing, clinics want one thing, the healthcare system wants one thing, and they're not all the same things. They all have their own best interests at heart. And so being able to understand that also and manage that process is critical to the success of a fertility journey and the ability to hold a healthy pregnancy to term and deliver a healthy baby.
This is StRest. I'm Kerstin Lindquist, health coach, author, and Emmy award-winning TV host. I've committed to helping people reduce stress through impressive health science, attainable mindset change, and biblical truth. Let's have a real conversation with zero judgment and endless solutions that you can use. You aren't alone. You can do this. Let me help you reduce stress and make room for rest.
Wow. Well, today's episode afterwards left me extremely emotional. I was in tears after I got off of this podcast with her. There's a time towards the end where if you watch, you can see I get a little bit tearful. And it's not like one thing happened. It's just that I started really thinking about my infertility story and what I went through and how I would have done things different. And this episode, as it was happening and she was talking me through it, I was thinking, wow. Had I had somebody like her going through infertility with me, I might not have had to go through all the pain that I went through. And also, it made me think that the diagnosis that they gave me of unexplained infertility was complete crap. And that I just took it. I mean, I wrote about it in one of my books. I took it and I believed it. And I think so many of us do that with diagnoses from doctors. It doesn't have to be about infertility. It can be about anything else. But we just take it because they're the doctors and we believe them. And what I learned, and you'll hear it and you'll see me learning it as we go through this episode, is that I really should have advocated for myself a little bit more. And I can't regret what I went through because I wouldn't have the 3 babies that I had and that I have if I had gone through that. But that pain of what I went through, which was so horrible, if that could have been avoided, and I want it to be avoided for everybody else out there. So this episode is really important for those of you who might be going through infertility, or for those of you who have been through it. Gabriela Rosa is a world-renowned fertility specialist. She's a reproductive health educator. She's a Harvard University awarded scholar, and she's the founder and CEO of the Rosa Institute. She has pioneered the world's first virtual and holistic fertility clinic. And she's going to guide us through what you need to do and the questions that you need to ask and how you need to advocate for yourself if you are going through, or anybody you know is going through, infertility. I apologize for the tears, but it's an important episode of StRest. Let me introduce you to Gabriela Rosa.
Stay with us. There's so much more to come. I'm super into the research right now when it comes to creatine and collagen. In fact, let's talk creatine for a second. And the one that I trust happens to be Ancient Nutrition. Research shows that women naturally have 70 to 80% lower creatine stores than men, which means we're ideal candidates for it. And collagen we know is important not only as a protein, but it's also great for joint health. And I've been feeling the joints a little bit more. I'm in my 40s. I have that cold shoulder, women's 40 thing, that there's a lot of different things we can do, but it's really important to pump up your collagen. So I'm doing the two together, collagen and creatine, and there's actually a new product from Ancient Nutrition that puts the two of those together. Creatine is one of the most clinically studied supplements, and it's a game changer for women's wellness. It supports cognitive health. That's what I love the most about it. Muscle endurance and recovery, and it helps you build long, lean muscles and strength while staying sharp. And then you pair that with clinically studied collagen, which is what we get from all of our Ancient Nutrition products, and that can help you you improve your joint comfort, your mobility, and your recovery. I take it right after a workout in the morning, and I still also love multi-collagen proteins and those peptides in my coffee every morning as well. So support your brain and your body and your beauty every single day with Ancient Nutrition so you can look toned, you can feel strong, and you can stay sharp. Here's what you do. You go over to ancientnutrition.com and put in the code StRest20. That's STREST20, StRest20 at checkout, and you'll get 20% off site-wide. Get your collagen, get your creatine, get your Ancient Nutrition. It is a pleasure to have you on the StRest podcast. This is the very first time that we have kind of really gone in with an expert. And in this case, you're a naturopathic doctor, correct?
That's right. Yes.
In the specific realm of fertility, which is so near and dear to my heart. So thank you for, I don't know, is it staying up late or getting up early for me? Because you're on the other side of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the time zones, today I'm in Sydney. Usually when I'm in Boston, it's very easy. But certainly when I'm in Sydney, I'm in the future and it is now morning. It's 5 a.m.
Well, good morning. Do you have any wonderful, as somebody who is into functional and health and integrative practices, what does your morning routine look like?
It actually, there are two things I do. I open my eyes, I meditate, and then I roll out of bed. That's it. My morning routine is very simple. And I think to have a morning routine, you actually have to have a sleeping routine, which is the most important part. And in fact, for fertility, it's such an important piece. But, you know, I make sure that I'm in bed by like 8:30. My kids are going, Mom, why do you go to bed so early? I'm like, because I have to get up early. So, you know, that's the trick to a good morning routine. And I'm naturally a morning person. So, you know, any given day, if I'm not getting up to have wonderful conversations like this, I'll be up because of my meditations. And, you know, between 4:35, it's like a normal wake up time for me.
I just feel like those of us who prioritize our mornings just have a better overall life in general. I think that the morning is where the juiciness happens.
I know. I also prefer, like, you would not catch me having these conversations at 5 p.m. Like, that doesn't happen.
No, not at all.
So I'm glad we're here at this bright hour.
Me too. I am too. So I feel like it's a vicious cycle when it comes to fertility. There is the stress of having infertility, and then infertility causes stress, and it is it's a circle that goes around and round. When I was going through it, people would tell me to just relax and you will get pregnant. And that literally caused me more stress.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, it's horrible.
How do you approach that with the couples that you're helping?
I think that I need to first give a little bit of context in terms of the couples I treat versus the couples in the general population who may or may not be having difficulty conceiving. So I think that the distinction here is that when you first start trying, we all hear people who had a drunken one-night stand and got pregnant, or somebody else who had an oops baby and they weren't trying, and, you know, they've got already 4 kids and whatever else. And
in which I would always say, I'm so jealous. That's not fair because that's not me.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, this is 93.6% of the general population. And so, you know, the vast majority of the population conceives without trying, or they literally decide and then the next month they're pregnant, you know, come off the pill next month, you know, oh, I'm pregnant. And so people think when at the outset of a fertility journey, people think that it's going to be very easy, that they're going to actually want to get pregnant, they're going to get pregnant, and then it's going to be easy. Or they've had the opposite experience at an earlier stage in their life where they got pregnant without necessarily wanting to, either decided to have an abortion or decided to have the baby, but then prolonged the next kind of pregnancy for a very long time, and then decided they wanted to have a baby and found that there were issues. So there's a lot of those different permutations. And the couples that I treat aren't the couples at the beginning of that journey, or even typically at the year mark of having been trying and having fertility difficulties. I find that the year one of infertility, there is a lot of this, big level stress, because when a woman wants to be pregnant, she wants to be already holding her baby. Like,
Mhm.
that's really the reality of it. She doesn't want to go through the 9 months. It's like when she decides she wants to have a baby, she literally wishes that she could click her fingers, materialize that little bundle of joy in her arms, and
Yes.
everything is great. Just the mere fact that you have to wait 9 months for the baby to come out is already slightly, kind of disconcerting. And so when that compounds to month after month of trying and it hasn't worked, the vast majority of my patients have on average been trying for 4 years. So it's a different level of, length of trying when you start to, go 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Yeah, I've had up to 19 years of infertility. Most of the patients I treat, they've already done all the things that haven't worked. They've done IVF cycles. They've done multiple different things that haven't worked. So the level of stress is different. And this is where I often say that, first of all, if you're trying to get pregnant and it's not quite going to plan, stressing about stress is not going to be your friend, right? So this thing that you just said is so true. It's like, oh my God, if somebody tells me to relax, I'm going to one punch them to
Mhm.
go like, what are you saying to me? And it's not helpful, because what I see in my clinic is that people can, it's not stress that's causing them not to conceive. There's usually many other factors that are getting in the way. And if we really follow that kind of line of thinking a little bit further, people in war zones get pregnant and have babies all the time. Right. So it's like, is it really stress to the level that people say? Of course, it's disconcerting, and it feels unevening to a certain extent, to a human, because you expect that you're just going to have sex and you're going to have a baby. That's normal. Right. When that has not happened, and you are being told, oh no, everything is normal, just keep trying. First of all, it's a lie, right? Because
Mhm.
if everything was normal, you'd be literally having sex, getting pregnant, having a baby, and we're no longer having this conversation. Therefore, it can't be true that everything is normal. So what does it mean when people say everything is normal? Well, what it means is that in the general population, in universal healthcare systems and privatized healthcare systems, so every healthcare system around the world, because we treat patients in every continent, you have a guideline of what medical doctors need to do to be able to ascertain if a woman or a couple are having difficulty conceiving, and to rule out very specific big problems that are going on. So, for example, they have to check that your fallopian tubes are clear. They have to check that you're ovulating. They have to check that you have a uterus that can carry a pregnancy. And then there is a recommendation for a semen analysis. Now, if it's the woman going to see the doctor and the husband or partner is not there, the doctor is just going to say, your husband should have a semen analysis. And then it's going to be up to that person to actually go and get a referral and do all of those things. Sometimes that doesn't happen even after 10 years of trying. Let me tell you, it's like, to me, it's unbelievably crazy that that would be left, as a unknown variable. But that's a whole other story. So then when that woman comes back for her results, they've done 4 tests or they've done 3 tests. It's those ones that I've just talked about, hormonal kind of blood tests, and maybe they've checked STIs. And those things are seldom absurdly abnormal. You know, it's very seldom that you will find completely blocked fallopian tubes, or that a woman will have a completely, and it
Right.
happens, but, it's very seldom that there will be no uterus, or there will be, a misshaped uterus that can't carry a pregnancy. Those are really big factors that obviously need to be ruled out. And when they are, that's what the patient will hear. Everything is normal, just keep trying. But that is not actually the whole story. And I think that that's really what it comes down to. So there's really, quite a lot that gets left on the table. So the stress piece is a really important part, just in how you feel going through the journey, which can be very unrelenting. And then there are so many other pieces that, come into that mix.
So I've got a lot of follow-up questions, but the first one that's important to me is there then anything to the premise that if you're under a chronic level of negative stress, now stress can be good for us. We need to build resilience. We need to be stressed in life so that it's good for our bodies as well. But if you're under a chronic low level negative stress, which I think is pretty much I would say a 21st century type of thing that wasn't really happening, even 20 years ago, that your body will consistently be in fight or flight and decide I'm not going to get pregnant because you're under too much stress. Does that actually happen? Because you saying something, which is totally true, that people get pregnant in war zones. They get pregnant when they're homeless.
Yeah.
Then what's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a really great nuanced distinction. So here's the thing. There is definitely an impact of stress on the pituitary hypothalamus and, of course, that whole communication between the brain and the ovaries, and that can disrupt regulation of ovulation. Okay. So there is that. And of course, it can increase inflammation in the system, which can then affect and impact how the immune system is working. The immune system is extremely important for maintaining a pregnancy. So sometimes, people will find that they will get pregnant easily, but miscarry. And so, then those pieces, it's not that we should disregard chronic stress. Chronic stress is going to be a problem. Okay. But again, chronic stress happens in war zones. So,
Yeah.
we have to figure out, okay, why is then the difference between somebody who's chronically stressed in the 21st century sitting in front of their computer at home and somebody who's chronically stressed because they can't pay the bills or whatever it is, and someone who's chronically stressed because they are living in a war zone. So, you see, and this is where then there is another layer of this conversation that's really valid for us to get into, which is the way in which people's physiology and biochemistry responds to stimuli, to external stimuli, internal stimuli, and exposures in general. So here's what happens. We've all heard of people who have never smoked a day in their life and died of lung cancer. And we've also heard of people who basically, are chain smokers and have never developed lung cancer at all. I have an uncle like this, poor guy. Um, but you see, eventually they will develop other health conditions, whether it's cardiovascular disease, whether it's, other lung conditions, whatever it is. They may not develop lung cancer because that's just not within their predispositions, or their body is reacting or responding to that kind of insult in a different way. And that's to do with epigenetics, right? The way in which our genes get switched on and off because of external stimuli will impact how our body expresses itself in the world. So for some people, their predispositions lay within their reproductive system. And changes that, our external stimuli will change that component of their being. For another person, it might be their digestion. They may develop diverticulitis or chronic digestive issues or, some other digestive condition, ulcers, you name it. For another person, it might be their nervous system that gets impacted, not their reproductive system. And so our predispositions and the subtleties of what happens within that genetic triggering of on and off genes, which will come from whatever's going on in our external world, is also going to matter here. And this is why I say to my patients, which are, again, a subset of a subset of the quote unquote infertile population, because the majority of quote unquote, I hate that terminology, but that's how medically it's defined as infertility. And so, if somebody has been diagnosed, self-diagnosed with infertility, because it's the only health condition that is diagnosed by length of time and self-reporting. Imagine that.
Yeah.
I've been trying
Wow.
for more than 12 months. Therefore, I'm not pregnant. Therefore, I'm infertile. And I can go to a doctor without trying at all and say I've been trying for 12 months and will be diagnosed with infertility. So it's a very funny diagnosis criteria or lack thereof, if you think about it. But putting that aside for a moment, the people who have really been trying for 12 months and haven't conceived, typically they will go to their GP and say that, and their GP will basically recommend that they do a couple of tests, which is, fallopian tubes, uterus, and ovulation. And then they will give them a referral to go to a specialist. Usually it's an IVF doctor or a reproductive endocrinologist, which is going to recommend IVF. That is the path for the majority of people in the general population. They are just going to be led down that path because there is no alternative within the healthcare system. So then they go and do that. But you see, here's the catch. 71% of IVF cycles started fail. 71. So literally only 29% of IVF cycles that get started yield a live birth. So those are pretty terrible odds if you think about it, right? And so where does it leave 71% of people? Well, trying again, being told that, oh, it's a numbers game, just keep trying. It is never a numbers game. When you have an egg and a sperm together, you should end up with a baby, full stop. When you've had an embryo transferred, you are pregnant at the time of transfer. No other questions asked. Whether you see or don't see a positive pregnancy test at the end of that next 2 weeks is going to be essentially a function of whether you are keeping your pregnancy to term, which essentially tells us, if you are not, that there is implantation failure or miscarriage. And so it's not just a cycle that didn't work. Right. And I think that that's something that we need to understand. But you see, that's then where it becomes really difficult for a lot of people. How many more times will you have IVF cycles that don't work before you go, okay, I've run out of money, because each cycle, out of pocket, we're talking $15,000 to $30,000, depending on where you are in the world. And so how many times can you try that? It was a really interesting review of 178,000 cycles that showed that you needed on average 8 cycles to have a close to 80% live birth rate.
Oh,
it's like,
goodness.
Imagine that. Imagine just from the emotional component of going through 8 failed IVF cycles. Like I can't imagine it.
I didn't go through nearly that many, and I still question all the time, my goodness, what negative effects did that put on my body over those years of fertility treatments?
Yeah. And that's the difficulty. I've had patients who have come to me and ended up conceiving naturally after 20 failed IVF cycles. 20.
Wow.
Now, I look at that and I go, okay, and this is actually why I ended up going to Harvard to do my doctorate in public health, because the way my patients, honestly, this going around in circles that happens within the healthcare system was infuriating to me. First, I used to think that it was because of the doctors, and I used to think that it was because of, the financial incentive of doing more cycles. And there is something to that, and there is some truth to that. Obviously, a lot of these very big IVF clinics are owned and have shareholders, and their function is to provide a profit to shareholders. So ultimately, there is a function of misalignment of interests. But ultimately, when it boils down to what is the core of the issue as to why fertility patients have such difficulty actually getting to the core issues of what's going on for them, is one, that it's a very small minority of the population that needs this kind of treatment because, like I said, 90+% of people will conceive without trying. The second reason is that the healthcare system's function is not there to provide the most amount of intervention for the smallest number of people. It's the opposite of that. Public health is all about how can we help as many people as possible with the least possible investment. Therefore, if you are that subset of the population that's having difficulty, either you have to invest from your own pocket into finding answers, or you don't. You don't find the answers that you need. And so that led me to understand that this is a really big structural issue for a lot of people. And if people don't understand that they actually need to advocate for themselves, that they need to actually take charge of their situation to be able to really go and find the answers that they need when they have been trying for a long time is not going to be given to them. It is decidedly not going to be given to them by their doctor, because in a 5-minute consultation, they don't have even the time to ask you the questions that they need to understand. And they're not equipped to be able to deal with this kind of situation. So either you take yourself outside of the standard healthcare system, and that's a minefield, because like I saw the other day, I was like, oh my dear God. I got retargeted for a fertility coach certification. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So as I clicked on it, because I was very curious, as I clicked on the button, I'm seeing like this very nice fertility coach certificate, and I look at the course, 10-module course, $78. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. Here I am, 24 years of clinical experience, Harvard graduate twice, and have treated thousands of patients in every continent across the world, and really very proven track record of reproducible results. And then people go on Instagram to talk to a fertility coach that literally has a $78 qualification, which has probably been created with the information that I put out there for free.
It's so true. It's an AI course, ChatGPT.
And so I go, wow. And so that's the minefield for patients, where literally they're having to navigate what is true, what is not true, what is going to be a waste of time, because this is another very big problem, is that fertility is finite. And so what happens is that you don't have cycles to waste. Either you have a strategy that is going to get you closer to your baby, or you are going to continue going around in circles. And if you're being told to do seed cycling, God forbid, that's going to really be a deterrent to you actually getting results. So there's so many pieces. And so, we go from the stress piece, which is, yes, it's going to have an impact. But then we need to understand that there are so many other exposures and so many other factors that will equally have an impact, and understanding for that one person in the couple, because again, we need to treat fertility as a team sport, because there is no such thing as this being a woman's issue. If a miscarriage has occurred, if a failed treatment has happened, if a couple cannot conceive, this is a couple issue. Make no mistake about it. 40% of all fertility problems are to do with semen, sperm, male factor. 40% are to do with the egg and female factors. And 20% is to do with the embryo and all the things that can stop it from implanting and, developing into a healthy baby. So we need to be able to really understand these pieces to be able to go, all right, how do we change? Where do we intervene? Because it's not every problem that you want to focus on changing or treating, because unless you are focused on the 20% of the effort that's going to give you 80% of your result, and knowing what that is really the key, you are going to run out of time trying to have a baby. And that's the distinction that a lot of times people don't quite understand, is that we do have to really understand and scope the problem in such a way that we are closer to the solution, simply because we then know what interventions to apply and what not to do. For example, if somebody has very low AMH and borderline high FSH, anti-Müllerian hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, those are two reasons, or at least one reason if it's happening in the same person, but at least two reasons why IVF is not necessarily going to be the best option. You see, and yet what is going to happen when you go to that medical appointment is that you're going to be told, well, you're running out of time, you need to hurry up, you need to do IVF. And IVF is not the best solution for that. If you look at the population data, you see that the most likely way to conceive is optimizing all of the different aspects. Male, female fertility and natural conception is usually the best option. Now, I am by no means against IVF. I think IVF is a wonderful technology. 78% of the patients. So we did a study through my master's thesis at Harvard, and we found that 78.8% of our patients took home babies, 47.7% natural conception. The remainder, through IVF. So it's not like we say, no, you should not go through IVF. You should go through IVF if it's the best, fastest path to baby and most direct path to baby, and ideally cheapest in your situation for you. But if that is not the case, then we should look at, okay, what is going to be the best alternative option here and focus on that.
When you say IVF, like in that study, are you including fertile embryo transfer and IUI, or is it just the IVF?
So no, so literally IVF cycles and embryo transfers. Typically, the way that it happens when people come to me, either they have embryos frozen and they want to keep that as an insurance policy whilst optimizing everything else they can to see if they can conceive naturally or go through a fresh cycle, because then they've made improvements that, make that more likely to occur. So typically they're going through, if they go through IVF within my program, it's typically they're going through a new cycle. But what's also interesting is that, when we did the study, vast majority of people, because we had all sorts of, like I said before, most of the people in this study, so there were 544 patients. And what was interesting is that the average number of years of infertility was 4 years, plus or minus 2.5. But we've had people in the clinic up to 19 years of trying to get pregnant. Yeah. And actually, I talk about that in Fertility Breakthrough, the book, which I make available free online, and I can, send you the details. But Fertility Breakthrough, Overcoming Infertility and Recurrent Miscarriage When Other Treatments Have Failed, is my latest book. And it's free on Spotify and YouTube, so people can just Google it and find it. But in the book, I tell several patient stories. The 20 IVF cycles is in there, and how that unfolded. The couple who came after 19 years of infertility is also another interesting couple, because by the time they came to me, they were being told, look, you're too old, your eggs are no good, and you're not going to get pregnant. And I often find this with the patients that we treat, is that once you understand what is the root cause and what are the issues that are actually stopping somebody from expressing optimum fertility, it's incredible what the changes that can actually occur. But, just going back to the study, what I ended up finding out was that, the majority of people who came to me, they were being told, you need donor egg. Your eggs are no good. It's donor egg that you need. And really, only 5.6% of people actually need a donor egg. So it's never a function of one thing. And this is part of where, people get really confused. It's so easy to want a simple solution to a complex problem. It's so easy to want that, because we all just want to have a baby when, as I said before, when we want to have a baby. And so it's really interesting how we start to look at this whole situation in a very different way, because all of a sudden it's like, well, it's not happening, therefore there has to be something else that I have to do. But because they're not being told what it is that they need to do, they start to add all of these things and end up doing way more kind of stuff than what's actually effective to get a result. And so it's so important to be able to disentangle all of that, because otherwise you run out of time trying to put in all these things that ultimately don't work, and yeah, it's a big challenge.
We'll be right back. Don't go away. It's just getting good. Get off the hormone roller coaster. The swings in midlife can drive you crazy. Between temperature shifts and sadness, sleep issues, I found an herb that's giving us real drug-free relief. It's called Elevate Organics Shatavari. It's USDA certified organic and uses SRI 81 Shatavari, the only clinically studied organic form that's made by the same suppliers as KSM 66 ashwagandha, which I love. It's the real clean deal. It supports hormone balance, energy, mood, and overall vitality without hormones or synthetics. It's clean, science-backed, and formulated by a trusted team from some of the industry's most reputable wellness brands. You can find Elevate Organic Shatavari at Sprouts and other independent retailers nationwide, or on their website, elevateorganic.com. Use the promo code Kerstin20 and get 20% off at checkout. They've got delicious gummies, capsules, and a whole line of products with Shatavari. Let's feel a little more balanced this season. Get Shatavari now. Use promo code Kerstin, Kerstin 20 at checkout. So you said in the study, and people who come in to see you, after doing various changes. So talk to me about some of the changes that aren't, let's just go straight to IVF, or that people need to do in conjunction with fertility treatments.
The very first thing is actually understand the problem. You have to do diagnostic treatments. So many times, especially in the US, where it's very expensive to access care, particularly out-of-pocket care. If you're going to, go and if insurance doesn't cover a test, most people will not have it done. And the problem is that is where a lot of the problem lies, is that they're not doing enough tests to understand the problem. Like if you're not scoping the problem properly, you are not going to be able to know, where do I need to intervene? Like I had a couple once who were infertile for 14 years before coming to me. And what was interesting about this couple was that for the first 8 years after they got married, they thought, oh, let's just not use contraception and see what happens. So eight years went by, they were having unprotected intercourse and never conceived once. Right. And so at the end of that 8th year, they're like, okay, well, there's something not quite right here. I think we need to start doing some fertility treatments. So they did that and did 6 IUI cycles, and that failed, and 2 IVF cycles that failed. By this stage, this woman is 40, and she's being told, well, you're too old and this is why it's not working and you need donor egg. So they then found me and we went through, I always assess a case before I take somebody on board. This is part of why our success rate is so high. Because if I assess a case and I go, no, I can't help this case, I will not offer a place in my program. Because I, 1, don't want to decrease my success rate, very transparently. 2, if somebody is coming to me to have a baby and I don't think that I can deliver that outcome, I really feel like they need to know that at the outset. And so that's a first step conversation that I have with any couple. It's like assessing the case to see, can I even help here? And so with this couple, as I'm assessing the case, I said, the guy's name's Dave. I said, Dave, is this the only semen analysis you've had? It was showing that there was only 2 million sperm and you need at least 20 million to affect a natural conception. And so I said, is this the only semen analysis? Has this decreased over time? What's the, have you always had low sperm count, or is this something that's recent? He goes, what? Low sperm count? I said, yes. And he goes, what do you mean low sperm count? And I'm like, well, you have 2 million. We need 20 million. So that's low. And he goes, nobody ever told me that. I'm like, wow. That was precisely my response, right? So I'm like, wow. Okay. So I said, look, we need to improve this, because if you are to have more chances to conceive and natural conception, obviously we want to make that as a part of our strategy, then we need to improve it. So I keep looking, and I found some other issues at the outset, but I also felt like, okay, we've done this before. We can help in this situation. So they start treatment. We start testing, and we start going through different aspects. Infections is a big one. And so we come to the infections piece, and both of them are positive for an infection that literally causes implantation failure and miscarriage. Both of them. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, we need to treat this immediately. Like, this is antibiotics right now, let's go. So we start treating, and we treated not just that, but everything else that was going on. And of course, we got his sperm to 36.4 million from 2 million. And, lots of other improvements. And this couple ended up conceiving naturally after 14 years of trying everything and nothing had worked, right? And so this is one of those things where, when you ask me, what is it that you need to do? If you don't understand the problem, you see, they could have done seed cycling for the rest of their life. They could have gone healthy eating and lifestyle forever. And still they would have ended up with no baby. They would have run out of time trying because some of the major issues that were getting in the way, i.e. infections, poor sperm count, you name it, were unaddressed, were literally ignored throughout the entire 14 years of their fertility journey before they came to us. And they didn't need donor egg. They just needed to treat an infection and treat all of the other things that weren't working. So when you ask me, what are some of the things that you need to do? I like to step back from doing and first understanding, like what do we have? Do we have core foundational tests kept off as, not just your fallopian tubes, your uterus, and are you ovulating? Or, do you have okay sperm? I'm looking at, okay, what are all of the things that we need to understand? How are the immunological components? How are nutritional deficiencies? How are, you name it. Really, we have like a very comprehensive, because, there are thousands of tests that you can do. And so understanding and aligning a couple to what is going to be the range and realm where they need to project is going to be the very important piece here. Because, let's say that the road has 360-degree possibilities. You can go in any possible direction, right, with a couple at the outset. Well, you need to figure out, are we going to go east, south, north, west? Like, where do we begin? And so that question of what are we dealing with? What are some of the obstacles that we're facing? That's going to in itself inform what tests we need to do. And then from that, what interventions we need to apply. Now, of course, what I like to say to couples who ask me the question of like, okay, so especially on social media or podcasts where people say, what do I need to do to improve my fertility? Well, that's really, really simple. What you do is everything that you would absolutely start doing and stop doing if you were pregnant right now. And you do that for both partners. So you do that literally for the female and you do that for the male. So if the male could position himself in the moment where he could imagine being pregnant, right? Because you see, here's the thing. You are already carrying 50% of that little baby you want to create. That's the reality. You see, and that 50% is already going to be a part of the embryo that's going to be created when the egg and the sperm meet. So that is a core building block component of you being able to hold your baby eventually. Therefore, the act pregnant now to get pregnant later has to apply to both sides of this equation, not just the female. You see? And so all of the things that you would absolutely imagine, you're pregnant, your baby's inside you, you want to give her the best possible start in life. What are all of the things that you would absolutely start doing and absolutely stop doing to carry the healthiest possible pregnancy to term and deliver the healthiest possible baby? That is everything you need to start doing and stop doing right now. And there is only a starting point. The end point is when you die. But all jokes aside, like this, that's the starting point. The end point is when you're holding your baby. Okay. Because it's not a matter of like, oh, I've done this for 5 minutes and it hasn't worked. No. You misunderstand the job. And here's the thing. The sperm manufactures itself literally on, a cyclical basis. So, well, the sperm doesn't manufacture itself. The cells within the testicles manufacture the sperm. But the reality of it is that men are constantly manufacturing sperm, right? And women, we are born with all the eggs we'll ever have. So the primordial follicle, which are the eggs or the follicles we are born with, to primary follicle, which is kind of where it starts to be recruited to then become an ovulatory follicle, those two massive stages that happen are about 4 to 6 months long. So the egg maturation process and ovulatory process doesn't happen last month or this month. It has begun 12 months ago for the egg that you are ovulating in this cycle. You see? And so that's where we need to understand that, yes, of course, there are improvements that you will be able to make throughout the entire 12-month journey. However, the optimization of cellular health is going to take time. So there is no point in you starting and going, oh, I've done this for 2 minutes and it hasn't worked. It's like you start and then you stop when you have your outcome. That's it.
So what about the person, because I am that person, who is given the diagnosis of unexplained infertility?
You don't believe it, first of all. Like, throw that out, because that means absolutely zero. Unexplained infertility does not mean unexplainable challenges, right? And so anytime that you get a diagnosis of unexplained infertility, you need to know that the doctors that have treated you have not actually dug deep enough to be able to understand the problem, to give you a proper diagnosis, you see? And so what happens is that a lot of people are diagnosed with unexplained infertility. I like to call it the lazy diagnosis, right? Because that is really just, it's not good enough, to be honest. And so, and again, it's a function of that 5-minute consultation, right? Because ultimately, what else can you expect from that? You know, like, other than, oh yeah, unexplained infertility, tick, here's the referral, go to your doctor. So when that is happening, that's where my work begins. You know, when people come to me, most of the people who come to me come with unexplained infertility. And I'm like, oh, yeah, another day in the office, let's go. So, you know, it's like literally then let's figure out, what do we have here? What do we not have here? What do we not understand that we need to be understanding? You know, what is it that we already understand that we need to dig deeper into? So all of those questions start to become the important pieces that make up what it is that we need to find to be able to treat effectively. So, you know, I think that the best thing that anybody with unexplained infertility can do is actually get really heavy on, I want more information. I want answers. I want to do all of the tests. Let's go and figure this out, because
And I feel
otherwise
like
you keep going around in circles.
that is an overarching theme that we talk about on this podcast. And it's a shift, it's a mindset shift for most people over the age of 20. Because I went through this 19 years ago, 18, 19 years ago. And even back at that time, I just trusted whatever my doctor said. Well, of course, they're the doctor. I trust what they say. They say, do this. They say, this is what the situation is. They say it's unexplained. They say this, that's it. Fast forward almost 20 years. And it's the same thing with any specialist you have or any doctor that you have. You have to be your own advocate. You have to ask more questions. And oftentimes they're practicing Band-Aid medicine. Okay, so we know how to fix this and put a Band-Aid on it if there's a fallopian tube issue or there's, you know, whatever it might be. We don't necessarily get to the root issues of things. And that's what we can do now. That's what somebody like you can go deeper into it. I mean, I've carried that unexplained infertility my entire life. And I have so many times in the last, especially 10 years, said, I wonder if we did this again and we went back and we looked and I got somebody like Gabriela, I wonder what they would really find, because I don't believe that it was just, unexplained infertility. Sorry, you're never going to get pregnant.
And, you know, it's so interesting that you say that, and so important that you say that. And here's why. When infertility goes unexplained and the understanding of why things aren't working in a biological, biochemical way, in the way that it should, usually those are flags, red flags to underlying deeper biological factors and biochemical factors within the system that can raise their kind of ugly head down the track. You see, let me give you an example. Let's say somebody is getting pregnant but not keeping a pregnancy to term. Nobody does anything other than say, oh, bad luck, better luck next time, just keep trying. And then you go and you actually assess the case and you find that there is antiphospholipid syndrome, for example. Right? Now, antiphospholipid syndrome causes clotting. It also is one of the causes of, increases the risk of stroke down the line, when you're older. And so you kind of go, hang on a second, that was not found. It was not addressed. And now we have a stroke. My blood is too thick, or, it's kind of clotting in an inappropriate way. And could that have been prevented? Yes, it could have. Had you found this when it was actually stopping you, it was giving you the signal and stopping you from actually keeping a healthy pregnancy to term. Had you gone and asked those questions and answered those questions, you would have prevented having had that stroke. You would have decreased the likelihood of it occurring and, the consequences of it being highly negative. And there are studies that show now that the diagnosis of infertility unaddressed for men and women increase all-cause mortality for both down the track. So infertility, the way that I see it, is really as a way, your body is actually, it's not broken. It's not betraying you. It's actually it's asking for help. It's asking for you to listen and really uncover what else it is that is necessary for it to fully express itself in the best possible way. So that's how I like to look at this question. And particularly in terms of unexplained infertility, it's like, okay, what do we need to find to optimize health in the long term? Because that really is what it boils down to at the end of the day.
On StRest, we talk a lot about supporting the systems in your life that hold you up, your habits, your routines, sleep, but that also includes your feet. Remember that song we used to sing, knee bone connected to the hip bone? That's not right, but you know where I'm going with this, right? It's all connected, and it starts with your feet. And if you're like me, you probably sacrificed comfort to style more times than you can count. I was able to join Revitalign when I worked at QVC to create really, really great shoes, flip-flops, sandals for you for many years. And now they are a sponsor of StRest. I love this brand. My entire family wears them. It's all about aligning your body from the ground up, literally, but also doing it with super cute styles. I wear them around the house, on long days of filming, even traveling, of course, down at the beach. And the difference is my body feels better at the end of the day. And that's what I want for you as well. Going into a new season, make sure you get yourself new, good shoes. And we have a discount for you. Visit wacoshoecompany.com. That's WACO shoecompany.com and enter the code Kerstin, KERSTIN 20 for 20% off. Everything from really cute wedges to boots to sneakers. Get out there and get your sneakers. That's Waco Shoe Company, WACO shoecompany.com, and put in the code Kerstin20, KERSTIN 20. So you get 20% off and support yourself from the ground up.
Couple of questions, and one of them, you went back and you were talking about, epigenetics and your gene expressions. If your mother has had a hard time conceiving, does that mean that you are more likely to have a hard time conceiving? And also, if your mother has had a cesarean section, does that mean you're more likely to have a cesarean section? I've heard those things before.
No.
Okay.
No. And look, I'll give you an example. My mother, my parents are Brazilian, right? I was born in Brazil. And even though I have a very Australian accent, because my parents moved to Australia when I was 12. And so, but what was interesting about this whole situation is this. My mother was on the pill when she conceived me. So it's like she had no problems conceiving, right? So, and they had been married for 3 years, and they were like, she wanted to focus on her career and study and whatever else. And so, of course, I had other plans. I'm like, I'm ready and I'm coming. So this is just how it's going to be, So she was on the pill and conceived me. And then, of course, fast forward many, many years later, at age 18, I get diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is the number one cause of infertility in women. In fact, the doctor did me the lovely example of what never to do with patients. Over the phone tells me, you have polycystic ovarian disease. And I'm like, am I going to die? Like, I'm just like, okay, what does this even mean? I was 18. I had no idea. What does this even mean? Like, am I going to die? Like, is this really serious? He goes, no, you're probably just never going to have children. I'm like, oh,
18.
So much better.
Thank you, doctor. Right.
That's even better news. So I'm like thinking, wow, So here's the thing. It took me a good 8 years to balance and regulate my cycles to even be able to start trying to get pregnant, right? And at the time, I wasn't exactly trying. So it was fine. I was studying. I started to kind of, because I knew this at 18, I started to really kind of live life in a way that was going to support regular cycles and improvements in those areas. So when I decided to actually have a child, I was able to conceive first try with my first and second try with my second. So, but if I had not known that, even knowing how to address it, and probably unconsciously, my whole kind of field of practice and career was, down this path because of that experience. I don't consciously remember going, oh, I'm going to do whatever it is that I can do to improve my fertility so that I can have children later. But in answer to your question, it's like my mother had absolutely no issues conceiving. If I had not known what I knew, I would have had massive issues conceiving. And as the doctor told me, probably never have children. You see, so my mom doesn't have PCOS. So it's one of those things where people are different. And even if they are genetically linked and, the mother and daughter, the way in which one person's expression occurs and another is going to be very different. So that's the first thing. The second question that you had asked was about, so the first question was about,
Your parent,
miscarriage?
no, if your mother has infertility problems, would you?
Yeah.
And then
And then
also
there
the
was another question.
cesarean section,
The cesarean section. Yeah.
C-section. Yeah.
C-section. So look, with C-sections, I think that's a much more functional factor. Of course, there will be factors like, for example, very narrow pelvic bone structures. In those cases, yeah, sure. If your mother has that and you also have that, then for sure that could be a factor. But again, not an absolute defining factor because there are people who try and manage. So, it's one of those things that it will come down to values and preferences of the patient. And so it's not necessarily the given situation that because your mother has had a cesarean section, you have to, although you may have in your thinking similar risk and values preferences and risk aversions that your parents had, which is like, oh, I'm not sure if I can. And again, that comes down to, this is a Pandora's box. We can like dive into
Of
this
course.
and go in a whole other different thing. But here's the thing. You might decide that I don't believe that for myself, and therefore I'm going to try and give birth naturally and I'm going to succeed. Whereas another person might say, no, because my mum had this issue, I'm afraid that it could cause a problem and, my baby could die. Like those are two very different thinking patterns and mindset patterns that you do have to take into account, right? And that's where values and preferences are also born. So it's going to depend very much on the person, what they think, what they are okay with, quote unquote, risking on their journey. And, for the most part, it's, natural giving birth vaginally is one of those things that has happened for, millions of years.
Yeah, since the beginning of time. Right.
I think that will continue happening. Wherever there is intervention, that there is then the choice of what people will decide to do for themselves. I know that for me personally, when I was pregnant, the one thing I wanted to avoid, like the plague, was having a cesarean section because I didn't want the scar on my very small Brazilian bikini. So it was a total vain move on my part. And, but all jokes aside, I also didn't want to not be able to carry my baby or drive for 6 weeks or, these are, again, values and preferences discussions that people have to have for themselves. Like for me, I knew that was my one thing. Like I didn't care if I was drugged. I didn't care if of course I know that these things for the most part, they're going to be relatively on a safety risk profile over populations. It's going to be relatively safe. And so for me, I was good with taking that kind of risk. Another person may not be. And so it just depends on, again, values and preferences. But no, there is no direct correlation or link of causation to because your mother had this, you're going to have that.
Yeah. I fought tooth and nail as well. And I fought and I ended up having a cesarean section. And it's another thing where I look back and I go, I feel like I was a little bit bullied into it. It was well over 24 hours into the whole process.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the one out the doctor did say, he's like, okay, you can leave, you can go home. And and come back. He's like, but I think that we should go in there and get this baby because we've had you on Pitocin. We've been trying for over 24 hours. I was a week overdue. Yeah. I had a baby at home already. And I was like, there's no way I can go home. I can't.
Oh my God. How could they say that? Like, this is the one thing I remember when I actually was in that, because I had a 40-hour labor. Okay. So that was the thing that I was also like, oh my God. And then they're like, oh, just go home. I'm like, I won't even walk to my car. What are you talking about going home?
Right. But my doctor was going on vacation. He wasn't going to be able to deliver if I didn't do it pretty soon, and all those things. So, but again, at 30, having gone through so much and just trusting the doctor, who I love my doctor. I mean, the fact that I got pregnant and had one baby, had one live birth via me, and then I adopted 2 gorgeous babies as well, was a miracle in and of itself. But looking back, I would do things differently. I would ask different questions. I would seek different, people in my corner. And I think that everybody needs to, and especially women in this vulnerable time of life, if you're a woman who's part of that population who doesn't just get pregnant and have babies, it's even more important that you get somebody who's more than just a regular doctor talking to you about this, who's really on your side.
Yeah, and really understands and takes, this is the one thing that I value and think is so important, is when patients come to me, I really view it as a collaboration. It's really like, okay, of course I have knowledge and understanding and expertise that they lack, and hence why they're seeking that, but they are the experts of themselves. And therefore it's like, let me ask you, what do you want? What do you prefer? What is it that's going to make you feel like, so that we're not going back to these thoughts of like, oh, if I had known better, if I had had more information, if I had understood this differently, I would have done different things. I mean, at the end of the day, Kerstin, I think that from my heart to yours, we do the best that we can with what we have,
absolutely,
right? And
absolutely.
I think that that's such a wonderful thing to be able to like even say, oh, okay, now I know something more. But I think that we don't want to use that as a way to regret what we did, because that was what we knew and that was the best that we could do at the time. I think that when people then understand more and get more education, get more information, it's really important then to up your game, right? And go, all right, now from this vantage point, what else is there? What else can I ask? How else? And if the practitioner, doctor, whoever treating you is not treating you with the same level of dignity, respect, and asking your input in your care, that's a problem. And know that that's a problem. And go and find somebody who actually will do that, because that's what you deserve. That's the level of care that every human deserves. And especially if you're paying, demand it.
Yeah.
Demand it. Because unless we demand more of our doctors, of our healthcare systems, of our experiences in this world, in a way that's not, demanding for the sake of demanding, but really something that is very, very reasonable to expect. This is not about entitlement. This is about like going, okay, you know what? I deserve to be educated. I deserve somebody to sit with me and help me understand this, And so I think that that's the mindset shift that has to happen for patients and consumers of healthcare, to really go into the healthcare system with that, understanding that, okay, your doctor may have told you that, but there is 1,000,001 reasons, like you just said. He was thinking about his holidays in the Caribbean and the, cocktails he was going to have by the beach. So, it's just like, do the values and interests align as well is a very important question, because one of the things that I see in fertility care a lot is this complete and utter misalignment of interests. Patient wants one thing, doctor wants one thing, shareholders want one thing, clinics want one thing, the healthcare system wants one thing, and they're not all the same things, and they're not all for each other's best interests necessarily. They all have their own best interests at heart. And so being able to understand that also and manage that process is critical to the success of a fertility journey and the ability to hold a healthy pregnancy to term and deliver a healthy baby.
So well
When
said.
things haven't been straightforward,
Yeah.
especially when things haven't been straightforward.
So true. Gabriela, where can people work with you? Where can they find you and get more information?
They can go to my website, which is www.fertilitybreakthrough.com, or they can Google me. It's Gabriela, Gabriela Rosa. And like I said, the Fertility Breakthrough, the book, is available on Spotify and also on YouTube, but they can go to fertilitybreakthrough.com, and from there they are redirected to all the things and all the places. And we have a very wonderful program called the Fertility Challenge that is completely free. It's a 14-day program. People can take that and, again, further educate and understand, what are the tests that I need to do? What is the best practice in terms of evidence base for lifestyle factors, for the things that I can put in place that are going to help me. So all that is available when they go to the website. They can find more information.
It's such an important conversation. I feel like we could have it for another 3 hours. But please, if you're going through this, you are worthy and you deserve more help, and to not feel like there is no hope. So please find Gabriela, read the books, do the challenge, and get more information. And if you're a parent or a grandparent or an aunt of somebody who's going through this, share this episode with them to allow them to hear some of this as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to meet you. Let me ask you a question. Do you have fillings in your mouth? Do you have root canals? Did you have your wisdom teeth out? What if what's going on in your mouth from all of those things is really what is making you sick, is responsible for some of the chronic conditions that you have, the pain, the brain fog, the Lyme disease, the inability to heal? This is a conversation that is long overdue on StRest. It's all about biological dentistry, and we're going to go all the way to Park City, Utah for the foremost expert in biological dentistry on what you need to be asking your dentist about at home, the one test that you need to take to see if possibly your fillings or your root canal or your extractions could be continuing to make you sick. We have Dr. Scott Chandler on the show. That's coming up on the next episode of StRest. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help others find the podcast and join our community. Follow me on social media at Kerstin.Lindquist for daily tips and inspiration. And visit my website at www.Kerstin-Lindquist.com to sign up for our newsletter and receive exclusive content. The information provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions that you may have regarding a medical condition. The host of this podcast is a certified health coach and medical researcher, not a licensed medical professional, and the content shared does not constitute medical advice. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we encourage you to do your own research and consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your healthcare treatment plans. Thank you for joining me on this journey to reduce stress and make room for rest. Remember, you're not alone. Keep coming back, share your story, ask for help, and give yourself grace.